Hey guys, Jacinta here with my review of Stranger Things 3 today. I have been so busy lately, so I hadn't really got a chance to binge watch the show, which is why I'm posting this review so late. But I finished it last night, so I thought I'd do the review now. So before I get into the review of season 3, I'm going to issue a spoiler alert because so much happened in this season that I will have to go into. So if you haven't finished watching the show yet, or if you haven't started watching the season, I suggest not watching this video because there will be spoilers. This season, I think is definitely my favourite so far. It was very fast paced, and it wasn't boring at all. It was very interesting from start to finish, and I really liked that about it. What I also loved about this season was that it was really funny. I know, like, obviously the other seasons there was humor in it, but they really did up the humor in this season. Like in previous seasons, there were a few outstanding characters that really were the prime source of entertainment in the show. For example, like there would be Steve and Dustin would probably be the main two. But in this season, every character really had their funny moments, and it was great. I really liked that about it. I also loved the character development in this season. The characters really grew into themselves in the season. I really felt that they were really fleshed out this season. That happened as a result of all the characters being they weren't all banded together throughout the whole season. They were in different sort of groups, I suppose, and faced with different scenarios, different situations, which was all kind of a piece of the puzzle sort of thing, which fit together at the end. But it's like in the season we have Dustin with Steve, who team up with Robin, who's a new character in the season, who works at an ice cream parlor with Steve. They team up with Lucas's little sister, Erica, to take down evil Russians. So they're doing that, whereas Joyce and Hopper are trying to find out. There's been things where there have been power outages and things have been demagnetized, so they're trying to figure out what's going on with that. And then there is Mike, Lucas, Will are all trying to, I suppose, basically Will has been sensing the mind flare is back in Hawkins, and they're kind of working on that. But then they eventually team up with Max and Elle, who have been trying to track down Billy and seeing what's going on with Billy, because Billy has been taken over by the mind flare, and he's going around trying to basically get more people sort of possessed by this, so that it has a human host, and while it has a human host, it's growing bigger inside of them. And then basically it comes out of them and it joins together, and the mind flare is just getting bigger and bigger. So that is the premise of this season. But basically the characters, they're all these little separate stories going on that all connect together, and then eventually in like the last episode all the characters join forces, and it's so epic. I loved that about the whole season. It was so great. What I also really loved about it was that they really upped the 80s feel of the show, like I said, in the 80s, but they really made that setting more strong in this season. Like, we had, even with the clothing and the hairstyles, like Nancy had a perm and was dressed in a lot more 80s style clothing. Yeah, they had the clothing, the music, the movie references. It is all so good. I really loved it. And then they also have, as I was saying earlier, with Steve and Robin and all trying to take down the evil Russians, they have that evil Russian trope in there, which feels really nostalgic of the 80s. And I really liked that. Like, it was really cheesy, but again, it's to do with the whole 80s thing, and I really loved that they did that. Yeah, this season was really, really good, and I just loved it so much. It had a really, I really liked the way that they showed how they really focused in on relationships as well in this season, with like Mike and Elle at the start were going off a lot, and he was splitting away from his group of male friends, and Will was getting very upset, and he wanted them to just kind of stay together and stay in his basement and play Dungeons and Dragons like they had been in the previous seasons. But it's like that they're growing up and they're kind of separating a little bit, and it's just, I really liked it. I thought it was very well done, and yeah, they had a really nice emphasis on relationships, I think, in it. Another thing that I loved was Nancy and Jonathan were at the working at a newspaper in town, and Nancy was being faced with sexual discrimination in the workplace, which I think, because it was set in the 80s, it would have been very prevalent then. It was very, like, you know, relatable, because that happens to women still. I know it probably doesn't happen as extremely as it did in the show, the example in the show, but I really like that they put that in there, because it added a lot of realism to it as well, and it felt very real. I love that. And I had one main criticism of the show, which would be around Billy. At the start, we see Billy as a lifeguard. He's coming out, and he's very. We see Nancy's mother, who is so, like, you know, into him and everything. And that scene, whenever he was all flirting with her, and you saw him walking by, and it was like slow motion and everything. And he was all like, all the women were drooling over him, literally. I was nearly sick watching that scene. He was so nauseating. I think he's meant to be that way, and I think he's meant to be kind of sleazy and ugh. But him with Nancy's mother, that was like that seemed to be, took up a lot of screen time for the first like episode or two, I think, where she was like flirting with him, and then she wanted to kind of cheat on her husband with him and go with him, and then it was kind of never mentioned again, and it just kind of disappeared. I think it was made such a big deal, and then it just was just completely forgotten about, and that would be a criticism of the season, really. It just didn't seem to make much sense. Like, it didn't seem necessary, I don't think, for that. Unless they were looking for some character development with Nancy's mother, I don't know. But I think there's different ways they could have gone about that, rather than having her pine after a misogynistic, just horrible teenage boy. I really don't like Billy. And that's another thing about Billy. When he is infected by the mind flayer, I feel like we are meant to feel sorry for the character who is infected by this, like. But in the first 2 episodes, again, I just was like, ugh, with him. And from what I've seen of him in season 2, I just couldn't stand Billy's character, and I didn't like him at all. And I felt like we should have felt sympathy, I suppose, for whoever was possessed by this thing. Like, I think it would have had more of a emotional sort of connection with with the viewer if it had been a character who we had grown to love and then they had been changed by this mind flare. But I felt like with Billy, he was horrible before and he was horrible after. But I suppose you could interpret that in that the mind flare was this horrible thing that wanted to get bigger and wanted to get stronger, and I suppose it started off by connecting to a host that was horrible, and that made it connected horrible with horrible and made it, if that makes sense, more evil on top of horrible, and it makes it more evil sort of thing. I don't know, I think maybe as well that maybe the writers kind of realised that Billy had been the weakest link from the last season, and that's why they wanted to kind of get rid of him, I suppose, in a way. I suppose, yeah, that could be interpreted both two ways, I guess. But yeah, that would be basically my another thing. At the end, after Hopper's death, it seems like Hopper's still alive at the end with the I'll get into that in a minute, but whenever all the characters think he's dead, and they did a voiceover of the speech that he wrote for Elle and Mike at the start, and Elle's reading it. Oh my god, that scene was so heartbreaking. I felt so like, oh, it was so sad. It was so emotionally impacting, though I actually cried watching that part. That was really good. And then there was, with Joyce and Will and Jonathan moving away with Elle because of all the stuff that's happened in Hawkins and everything. We also got to see Jonathan and Nancy kind of sort of go like, oh, I love you and everything, and it was meant to be a sad breakup. But that's another thing as well. I liked Jonathan a lot more in this season, I think, but I really didn't like him in previous seasons. I thought he was really weird. But I think him and Nancy are kind of just an odd sort of couple, and I don't like them together. So I think that maybe with them having the long distance relationship now, with him moving away, I think that maybe that would cause complications between him and Nancy, and I think actually that might be for the best. And as well, she and Steve didn't really have much on-screen time together. The first time they were seen on screen together in this whole season was whenever he just drove in front of Billy and saved her from getting knocked down by his car. And that was when everything just started to go to shit, literally, and everything it was just really fast-paced from there on, and they didn't really have much time to talk. But I felt like from last season, Steve and Nancy didn't really have much closure, or things weren't really tied up very well between them, so maybe things might be rekindled in the next season, but I'm excited to see what happens. That was another thing actually with Steve and Robin. I really liked. I think that was really, really clever. I really thought, when you're watching a show and you see two people that kind of have good chemistry and you kind of think they're gonna get together. I was so thinking that about Robin and Steve, and to be honest, I was kind of shipping it. But then it turned out that Robin was a lesbian, and I was like, oh my god, that was actually I think that was a really clever sort of twist, and it made you think like, oh, they're so gonna get together, and then the revelation comes and you're like, oh, they're not gonna get together. That's what I was like. But it was so good as well at the same time. I thought that was, as well, it was representation of the LGBT community as well, and I really liked that. I thought that was very, very good, especially in a show that is set in the 80s. That was very clever. And now my final point will be on the last scene at the very end, where they were in a Russian headquarters and two Russians drag out this prisoner from a cell after one of them stops by another cell door and the other one's like, no, not the American. And then they bring out this other prisoner and to a cell, but first, whenever they said not the American, Hopper had always been referred to by these Russians during this whole battle kind of thing against the Russians as the American. So that makes me think that Hopper's not dead. because we didn't actually see him die. That makes me think he's not dead and he's in there and that's him, because I don't know who else the American could be. I really have no idea. Like, it doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. It has to be. It must be Hopper, because again, he's too much of a favorite in the show to be killed off, I think, and that's going to be more interesting now for next season. That it'll be see what will happen to Hopper. I can't wait for that. But back again with what they did, and they brought the other prisoner to this like cage or whatever. They let, after that, the ending scene was they let in a creature that looked like the Demogorgon, one of those demo dogs from season 2. And I was watching it and I was thinking, oh, that's the setup for next season, I guess. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, is this going to be another rehashing of the same story again? I feel like maybe that it might be time for them to start wrapping things up, because it may be repetitive. That's just my only thought, maybe for the next season. But I will still obviously watch it, because this season was absolutely great and I loved it so much. Yeah, it was so great. And we had two new characters. Well, one new character, which was Robin, and another kind of character became a main character, side character, which was Lucas's little sister. And she was amazing. She was so funny and sassy, and I really hope that they continue to include her more in the cast. They gave her a lot to do this season, and she's now a new favourite of mine, so I just hope that she is as big in the next season as she was in this one. Yeah. So I think that really concludes my review on Stranger Things. I think I've covered all the points really that I had and everything. So yeah, that's my review of Stranger Things 3. If you've seen the full season, let me know what you thought of it, if you liked it and if you didn't, and if you agreed with my review or not. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I absolutely loved this season. Yeah, so yeah, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to my channel. Okay, see you guys, bye!